This is the first of 8 webinars in a series on the principles of good practice. CDS is thrilled to kick off this 2-year series and announce that we will be offering a certificate of participation for those who attend 5 out of the 8 webinars. Please look to the Vanguard newsletter for more information on this opportunity. The principles of good practice were revised in 2023 by CDS after a 3-year deliberative and member feedback process in order to better align with contemporary concerns related to social, economic, and environmental justice. The principles are intended to guide community development as an applied field of academic practice. The principle of dignity within diversity encourages us to participate and foster cultural humility, non-judgmental listening, and accountability for any harm done. In today's discussion, our key presenters will hold space for conversations related to engaging participants across differences in identity and culture through guided, practice-based conversation. We will explore the distinction between dialogue and debate, reflect on systems of power and privilege, and engage with research, examples, and peer perspectives to strengthen our community development practice. It is an honor to now introduce our presenters for today's webinar. Dr. Dwayne T. James, PE, is a dynamic leader with a deep commitment to community engagement and expanding access to opportunity. He serves as the statewide director of access and engagement for University of Missouri Extension, where he leads efforts to foster a culture in which all individuals, faculty, staff, participants, volunteers, and partners are valued, supported, and able to thrive. He also serves as a field specialist in community development for St. Louis County, leading impactful programs such as the Neighborhood Leadership Fellows and the Youth Empowerment Program, initiatives that equip residents with the tools to drive meaningful change in their communities. With a background in structural engineering and public service, including serving as a Ferguson City Council member and co-founding the Ferguson Youth Initiative, Dr. James brings a unique blend of technical expertise, civil leadership, and a strong dedication to strengthening communities. He holds a bachelor's and master's degrees in civil engineering and a doctorate in education. Our next presenter, Leonardo Pizzagna, was previously the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Specialist for Michigan State University Extension until his retirement in March of 2024. He has over 25 years of experience developing, teaching, and facilitating culture, access, and inclusion education programs through Michigan State University Extension, Adrian College, and Siena Heights University. He remains a faculty member as part of the Great Lakes Leadership Academy Emerging Leaders Program, which he last taught in August of 2025. Leonardo's work as an activist and educator is grounded in his conviction that deep and lasting institutional change requires an equally strong commitment to working on oneself while nurturing authentic relationships across difference. He believes that authenticity is far more than mere friendship or working affiliation. It is based on trust, honesty, risk-taking, mutual responsibility, humility, and acceptance that tension in relationships is a necessary component that leads to growth. As a lifelong learner around issues related to social justice and change, Leonardo has participated in foundational learning opportunities such as Cultural Bridges, Visions Training, Open Doors, and the People's Institute. Leonardo earned a bachelor's degree in sociology from the University of Michigan and a master's degree in organizational leadership and development from Siena Heights University. Dwayne and Leonardo, thank you for being with us today, and I'll let you take it from here.
All right, Tanner, if you can go ahead and share the slides with us, that'd be great. And you can go to the second slide. Wonderful. So we're here to talk about the principle of good practice, dignity within diversity. And we're hoping that as at the end of this, you'll have learned something new, and then also things that you can take away with you. And so dignity within diversity, if you can go to the next slide. is the practice and fostering of cultural humility, non-judgmental listening, and accountability for any harm done. And so, as Tanner mentioned at the beginning, this is our focus is going to be on for the next hour and a half. And I also just want to share that I appreciate everybody sticking around for my late arrival. I had a link and it was the wrong link. So I'm glad that Tanner was able to help me out there. And Dwayne, anything you want to add?
No, I agree. I welcome everyone here, and I'm looking forward to this conversation and discussion with you, and then also with everyone that's on the screen as well.
Great. So if you can go to the next slide. And what we're asking you to consider is that we can move these conversations from debate to dialogue. And oftentimes when we're in a debate, uh, the conventional process, we can look for one right answer. The goal is to be right, to win or persuade. It's evaluative and it's critical of another person's thinking, another person's thoughts. In my mind, what I might be thinking about is what's wrong with this picture? What's wrong with this person who is standing in front of me that might be having the wrong idea of what the issue might be? We're listening judgmentally for errors and flaws, and we're planning our rebuttal. So we're spending a lot of time on not really listening, but really planning the way that we might respond to the individual. The understanding process, which is more the dialogue process, there's multiple and valid perspectives. So there's many different ways that we can look at getting to the right an answer that might be correct. The goal is to understand. I can be curious and open. And I think about my grandson who at 5 years old was asking me, Grandpa, why do leaves fall from the tree? Well, it's fall, and that's what happens in fall. And so I didn't have a really good answer for him, but it was something that he was curious about. And he was open to understanding that there might be more than one perspective. I'm asking myself, what can I learn? I'm listening for their story. So I'm setting up a situation where the person can tell me their story versus an area where I might already make up what they're saying or what they're doing. And I'm listening more than I can talk, which I'm not doing a very good job of right now, but I want to listen more than I can talk, and I want to reflect instead of react. So
Yeah, so
Dwayne,
on that
anything
on
you want
that
to add?
point, yeah, on that point, we are here to listen as well as we share. So we love for information to be shared in chat as conversations and thoughts come up. And so please share your additional thoughts as we're going through these slides. And in going through this process, Leonardo, I think I've been so often going with the conventional process just because of not knowing any better, or just because of time constraints, or just because of all the reasonings and excuses that I can come up with. But really understanding, like, that understanding process, as you were talking about your grandchild, it just reminds me of the stories that my mom talked about me about. Kept asking questions like why this and why this, and so I was that curious kid, and I've been around curious kids and youth and teens, and so why do we stop that once I become a I should say, why did I stop that once I became an adult? I should still be in that state of curiosity and trying to understand more questions. And so sometimes it can take a little bit more time and effort to be in that understanding process, but it's so valuable to me. So thank you for I'm loving this conversation and discussion as well.
Yeah, and so I think it's important for us to also understand that through a dialogue, we can come up with multiple ways to address a situation. And too often the default is that we have to come up with one right answer, and the
Mhm.
person who has the loudest voice or has the most allies that are there with them is the person that wins out. And we don't have to look at conversations around diversity as one answer fits all. It can be, multiple answers, multiple perspectives. And the goal is for me to understand more than what it is for me to be reflective or react to a situation. So Dwayne, you want to go to the next question, or next slide?
Yep.
Discussion. So we want you to discuss at your pleasure, whether it be in the chat or for yourself, to just think about what are the feelings that you have when engaged in a debate. And then also, what could be, or what have you done, or what could be done to move from a debate into a dialogue? And so we're going to have you spend a few minutes either writing your reflections in the chat or raising your hand. And I can have Dwayne call on an individual if they want to share something over the microphone.
All right, Rick, I see that your hand is up. Please share.
Let me get my family down here too. I'm wondering if we're let's say there are two people, and there is one person that is taking a conventional view, and the other is taking a dialogue view, and so or one's debate or one's dialogue, and um, there we are. And one wants one, and the other wants the other. And how is it that we transform it into the dialogue without making enemies?
So that's a great point. And Dinar, I saw you want to share, then I can share follow up from you as well.
Oh, go ahead,
No,
Dwayne.
and we had a conversation about that. I think for us is more of going into the conversation, understanding how you want to approach the conversation and discussion. Like I can go in thinking it's going to be a dialogue and it might move into a debate. And so what does it look like for me to really judge my own reactions, but then also monitor the situations, the conversations, and the shares that I say to see if I'm saying anything that's moving it into a debate. And if it's moving into that debate atmosphere and one that is not a culture or a space or a time that I want to debate or I feel is best to debate, what does it look like for me to understand how to excuse myself from the situation or stop the conversation so then we can get back into a space where we can actually dialogue and really have that enriching, meaningful space as well. And so I think in that space, I think that there's different keywords, different reactions or actions that actually happen that can be triggering and move us into that space. But if we're cognizant of what does it look like for us to ensure that we're in a space of curiosity from my own tone, body language to questions that I ask, I can kind of monitor that situation, even if it moves close to that line or that edge. How do I bring it back by being more curious of how did you come up with that conclusion? What does that actually look like? Can you share more? And so even my tone and my reactions and my questions could possibly adjust the situation as well. I found myself that I'm doing better. Don't get me wrong. This is actually recorded. That once that debate actually happens, I'm like, all right, let me go ahead and draw the line in the sand and get ready as well. But I need to understand like that is not the best. So how do I also just monitor what I can actually monitor in that space as well? Leonardo?
Yeah, and I also think that, you have the choice, Rick, of moving away from that conversation. The minute that it goes into a debate, I think that you have the ability to be able to say, I don't think I can engage with you any longer, and then walk away. And I think that that may be a way for you or others to understand that it's moving out of a dialogue and more into a debate, and I'm not interested or willing to participate in that situation. So, it's complex, as Lisa has said in her thoughts about the feelings in a debate are complex. They for sure are complex, but I think that you have the ability to be able to say, not today, or maybe not ever, am I going to be involved in a debate with you, because I do see where there's differences in our experiences. And I have to, be of, I have to just be aware of when it's moving out of a dialogue and more into a debate, and decide if I can engage with this person or I want to walk away.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Rick, thank you. And I agree with Keith. I think I go in and I'm very quiet at first just to monitor the situation, just to see exactly what does that look like? How do I understand the culture that we're in, the space that we're in as we're doing this work? And so really are trying to ask those questions just to get a tone and a feel of the space to see how best for me to engage in the conversations as well.
yeah. Okay, if you can go to the next slide. And we want to share some guidelines for today that we think are things that can be assistance for us to move things out of a debate and into a dialogue. And so the first one is to try on, and really is to enter the conversation with the sense that I'm going to try on new ideas or new ways of thinking, but I may not, they may not feel right to begin with, but I'm going to have the perspective of being able to try on new perspectives or new ideas.
And the next one is it's okay to disagree. And as we move into those conversations and we're sharing our own perspectives and also listening and learning other people's perspectives and thoughts and gaining more understanding about their own lived experience and how people are coming to different conclusions, it is okay to have those conversations and discussions, disagree, and be able to walk away respectfully. Once we move into the debate, it's that win-win. And so, no, I'm gonna have to change your mind. But as we have those conversations and discussions, it is okay to say, all right, thank you so much for sharing your perspective, and then move away without attack, without belittling, without harming the other individual or harming the situation as well. Because I know I don't want to feel that way if someone doesn't agree with me. So what does it look like for me to also not do that to the next person as well?
Yeah. And it's okay to blame. It's not okay to blame, shame, or attack the other individual or myself for things that I may have learned that that are becoming more aware of, that I'm becoming more aware of. And I think that one of the things in these conversations around diversity is oftentimes the dominant group, whether that be white, whether that be male, whether that be a person who is of a different class background, they may come up with a lot of shame. I mean, I have seen it occur in individuals, where they start to blame themselves or attack themselves or shame themselves for what they've learned. And what they have to do in those situations, what I have to do in those situations, is I really need to be aware that I was programmed in a way to look at things in particular ways, and there might be multiple perspectives, and so I need to try on, different ideas or different thoughts, while at the same time be aware that my shame might be the first thing that comes up for me as an emotion, but I don't have to stay in that shame cycle.
And next up is practicing that self-focus. And so if you're hearing us talk and share, it is a lot of I statements. I feel this way. This is what I can do. This is how I enter the situation. And so what does it look like for us to really, really focus on our own feelings and our own actions and not project that onto others of what we expect or hope or want them to really change as far as themselves, and really using those statements of I believe this way, I feel this way, this is how I interpret the situation, and not the generalizations of the we's and you alls and you coulds and you shoulds and terminology is like that as well.
Yeah. And I think that the next one would be notice process and content. And so being aware that oftentimes in academia, we are really focused in on content, on what it is that I'm going to deliver, what it is that I want to make sure that people get, instead of looking at that many of the things that we can be engaged in as far as a dialogue is concerned is also process. The way that we enter into the dialogue, the way that we enter into the room, the way that I can see that I'm not the expert, but I'm rather somebody who has a perspective. So I'm able to look at both process and content as being equally, or at times where maybe I'm leaning more towards process instead of content and so on, in order for me to be able to have the type of conversation that I really want to have.
Next up is the both and thinking. And so practicing understanding like it could be both situations or both opportunities or both thoughts or both thinking processes or both lived experiences. Understanding it's not an either or. It's not either, it's my perspective or your perspective. One doesn't have to be right over the other. Really understanding how do we go in and think about differing viewpoints and different journeys and different ways to approach the same issue as well. And so thinking about that both and really helps, in my opinion, engage in the conversation, brings the other person and the other thoughts into the aspect as well, and really um, respects the lived experiences and the perspectives and the knowledge of that person I'm actually having a conversation with, instead of trying to project everything on to that next person as well.
Yeah, and then also being aware of intent and impact, and being aware that my words, the things that I say, may not be intended to be hurtful, but they may have a negative impact on the person who is of a different diversity, different perspective, different identity than what you are. And being aware that the intent is as important for us to be able to be aware of the impact that it's having on somebody different from me. And so I'm very much aware that my intentions may be good, but the impact may be very different. And the way that it showed up for me is when people say that, what are you? Well, I'm Mexican American. And I put in Mexican because it's important for me to know that that's where my lineage comes from. I could also say that I'm Latino in the sense that that's where my lineage comes from. But when I'm being attacked, it oftentimes feels as if people are saying that I should be out of this country and don't understand that that's having an impact on me. That the intentions may be just that you feel that we ought to have a different maybe immigration policy in this country, but the impact is that it does impact me, and it does impact other people of color in ways that maybe I need to learn from and listen to what the impact is instead of what my intentions are.
Yeah, and this is this is truly one that I continue to work on, because even with your question, um, it can sound like a curious question of what are you, where are you from, all of that, but it can actually be the impact of what, I don't belong here. And so me trying to be curious and trying to get you to get to know you a little bit more can also sound offensive
Yes.
as well. And so understanding my intent is for us to engage in conversation, but the impact to you could be very challenging. So me, I can, if I try to explain myself, all I'm trying to do is, instead of just saying, I'm sorry, I apologize for offending you. And going in that route, understanding that me trying to defend myself or express my intent and all that is just going to probably harm the situation a little bit more than not. So yeah.
Yeah, and I wanna look at the chat and Presanta. I'm hopefully I'm pronouncing that name correctly. I'd like the reminder that disagreement is not a sign of dysfunction. It's okay to be normal to disagree. And so I think it's really important for us to be able to understand that disagreement doesn't mean that I hate that person, but I just disagree with their perspective or their thoughts. And there's got to be a way that we might be able to move towards agreements without having to be involved in the debate.
So true.
Yep. Thanks, Dylan.
No problem. Accept unfinished conversations and discomfort, understanding when we're going into this conversation of dialogue, it could really take some time and some effort. And so what does it look like for us to peel back that first layer, understanding there's many different layers below that? And so how do we accept that this is the initial conversation of many. This is the initial conversation of discovery of me really learning and expecting, or not expecting, but perceiving different thoughts and different perspectives. And so being okay with those unfinished conversations, understanding like as I'm engaging in some of those conversations and discussions, it might bring up some triggers of some discomfort for me, but what does that look like for growth opportunities as well as I'm continuing to do this work? And so as we're doing this, expect that, accept that for yourself, but then also how do you also do that for others as well? So you're monitoring some of that situation where they might be uncomfortable, discomfortable. We're not going in and using that as an opportunity to get our point across, but we really are caring about that person as well.
Yeah, and I think it's also really important to know that it's not, I think it might be important for us to change our perspective around conversations, that there's got to be multiple conversations that build trust, each one of those, in a way that I feel like I can come to you and disclose other things, or I can feel like, you put up some barriers and I just need to stop the conversation right there. So it's important for us to understand that there's going to be unfinished conversations, and each one of those conversations builds trust in the individual and the organization that you might be responsible or you might be representing. And the last one is to maintain confidentiality. And I think it's important for us to understand that by maintaining confidentiality, we're saying that we're going to be confidential in the way that we speak to each other, in the way that we are going to interact, and that others that enter into this, maybe it's a tape conversation like today, where they just listen to the tape and they really don't have any interaction because there isn't a chance to maintain that confidentiality. There isn't a chance for me to know more about each of the perspectives that I'm looking to gain, and also to be able to look at the ways that we're going to make this conversation one that is open to different perspectives from the people that are present versus people that might be listening at another time. So I want to just share with you that the guidelines have been things that have been helpful to me. If you want to go to the next slide. And it can help move spaces into dialogue and away from debate. It can be more interactive, allowing groups to set their own working agreements or guidelines, and that takes time. So if you're going to go in with a set group of guidelines, you can use this or ones that you're more familiar with, or you can take the time for a group to build their own working agreements, and then at every time that group gets together, that you share those at the beginning in some different way, that you might be able to ask people, what are they experiencing? Are there any that are missing? So it's important to make sure to go back to the guidelines to check in with self or others. How are we doing? Are there guidelines that we need to add? And then also an individual can operate from these guidelines without the involvement of others. And so I can continue to use these guidelines as things that hold me closer to my values. And then I can share them with others, or I can, use those as what guides me in a dialogue more than a debate. So Dwayne, is there anything that you want to add about those guidelines?
Yeah, I would love for other individuals to also share in the chat of what has come up for them when they're seeing these guidelines or seeing these approaches to using these guidelines. For me, I know we're having a conversation about diversity, and I want to make sure that we're clear that when we're talking about diversity, we're also talking about the diversity of all different identities. And so I look at this and I think about engagement in general, because we're all coming in with diverse perspectives and diverse thoughts. And so really looking at this in every facet of the work that we're doing And specifically, this last point, an individual can operate from these guidelines without involvement with others. In doing community work, leadership work, I sometimes hear, well, the organization doesn't do this, or this isn't the culture of this space, or the community doesn't follow this. And I try to encourage people of what does it look like for me to basically adjust that culture or basically lead in a space of the culture that I actually want to see. And so for me to follow these guidelines, even though everything around me might also be cluttered and not following these, I can still lead with this perspective of discussion and not debate. Even though everyone else wants to go there, that doesn't mean that I actually have to basically move into that space. And I think that can, we're talking about actions. And so if we're leading with those actions, then others might actually see how they are actually in practice. And then maybe slowly by surely more people will actually have those conversations and discussions. So I really, really I love everything, but I love this key point of like, it is on me to continue to do this, even though others might actually agree with that as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's something that holds us closer to our values. If that's the way that I want to interact with somebody, then I've got to set up processes that will allow that interaction to take place. And too often the default is debate where there's only one right answer versus, setting some guidelines or some working agreements does allow us to move more into a dialogue. But it's, either one, we're going to take time to set guidelines or working agreements, or we're going to go in with a set group of guidelines that we're going to hold ourselves accountable to as much as I hold somebody else. So Keith is saying in the meeting, I oftentimes pause and ask, are there any others that need to be here at the table? And then how do we engage with them? What are the difficulties in bringing them into discussions? Yeah, very good point. I think that depending on your perspective, you've got to be aware of who's not at the table.
Yeah. And I was about to put this in as a response, but also how do we move the table to them?
Mhm.
And what does that look like for us to engage in communities, how they want to be engaged and where they engage as well. So Keith, I know that you were saying, I just want to go ahead and add that on as well, because that's the first thing that popped into my head as well.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, if you want to go to cultural humility and just a definition, a lifelong process and commitment to self-evaluation and critique, to redressing the power imbalances in the caretaker-patient dynamic, and to developing mutual beneficial non-paternalistic relationships and partnerships with communities on behalf of individuals and underrepresented populations. And this is from the piece that Murray Garcia wrote in Journal for Health Care and Poor and Underserved Individuals or Communities. And so if you want to go to the next slide, Dwayne. So we have lifelong learning and critical self-reflection, recognizing and challenging power imbalances, developing mutual beneficial partnerships between communities and defined individuals, and advocating for and maintaining institutional accountability. And so it's important for us to look at the ways that, we might be moving towards cultural humility or moving away from it, depending on the situation. So I've got a problem with my battery and my for my computer. So I'll be back in just a minute.
All right, we'll move into the discussion questions as well. So when you're seeing this definition, but you're also seeing these key points, are there thoughts and ideas that come up? And one of the questions that we really, really wanted to ask of you as we're broaching these conversations about cultural humility is, once I can get to that next slide, is what does cultural humility mean to you? And what are you doing day to day to support the of cultural humility? So if you want to answer that first question, you can put it in chat, or you can come off of mute to basically share that as well. Maybe put it in chat. Just oh, he's back. Okay, really going into that aspect of what does cultural humility mean to you? We shared the definition, we shared some key points, but for you, what does that mean when we're saying those two words? Asking the group.
And again, you can raise your hand if you need to, or you can put your information in the chat.
Consideration. It means understanding I don't know everything. I have to be open to learning at all times. That curiosity, continual learning and listening. Couple of more. Not creating programs for communities, especially those I'm not culturally a part of, but co-creating programming together. That co-creation, yes, co-creation, yes. Empowering and educating and giving the power. Yes, thank you. I very much agree with the definition offered, and to some extent is a special application of the general concept of humility. Sharing and respecting each other cultures. It means difference, not oneness, connecting to create wellness. Y'all are on point. Go ahead. Go ahead. I love it. I love it.
And given the time, I think the other thing is, being aware that all of this takes time because it's moving from a model that we want to maintain, and that's power over, versus a model that we want to move towards, and that's power with or power to. And I think that that's really important for us to create spaces or places where we have time allotted for the work that we need to do together to co-create.
Yeah. And I would say time is of essence, but also don't let time be a detriment of you doing the process as well. I can always fall back. I don't have enough time, but I make time for what I want to make time for. And so if we're doing this work, and that is me talking to myself, not talking to anybody on the screen, but it's also me saying that to hold myself accountable. But then how do we also encourage and coach others through that process as well? So I know, we have some more slides, but I want us to get to this second question of what are we doing day to day to support the principles of culture humility? This is me asking for suggestions, help, encouragement, principles, best practices that I can add into my toolkit as well. So if you have seen some day-to-day principles or interactions or activities that really support culture humility, ones that you do or you've seen from others, please share those in chat. I think that we're in a learning environment so we can learn from others as we're continuing to do this work as well. I think for me, just being present, not always going into spaces with an agenda, but going into spaces to learn. And so, what does it look like for if I'm working with community members? Showing up at community events just to be there, not as an extension agent, not as someone that is asking anything of them, but being there to learn, engage, get immersed in that space. When I say immersed in the space, not getting on the tour and just driving through, but actually talking and interacting and being humble in that space. I am here to learn and soak it all in and see what I can do in that space. Staying present, speaking up when I hear expressions of lack of cultural humility. Yes, speaking up. Yes. Yes, being in and with community, not just a part of the job. Trust me, I'm not, I'm from the government. I love it. I love it. All right.
And
Any
I
other?
think that, Dwayne, I think one of the things is that we also need to know that if we're practicing cultural humility, it does, one of the impacts that it has is trust building. And
Mm-mm.
I think we need to make sure that as we practice humility, that we also understand that the payoff will be that we'll encourage and will support trust within the group and other ways that we might be able to to also do that, because I think it's really important for us to understand that trust is something that we're not very practiced at. And oftentimes when we're thinking about conversations around diversity, we certainly are not. Yes,
Wonderful.
Rick, what did you have to say?
I just want to suggest I'm sitting here in Wisconsin,
Yes.
in Madison, and we have a cultural diversity a little bit different in Madison than we have in the rest of the state. The rest of the state, we could just say for simplicity that it's rural, urban, and the rural and the urban is so diverse that we could spend years sitting here parsing it out. But from the standpoint of um, diversity and culture, even though there are um, um, millions of white people in the urban area, and there are millions of white people in the rural area, doesn't necessarily mean that we're on the same page, that we engage in the same culture and the understanding of how life is and how it influences each of us. And so here in Wisconsin, there's um, a continuing interest and challenge to understand our rural neighbors, and I hope our rural neighbors are trying to understand us urban neighbors, although I think it's sometimes one way. And so I just want to just suggest that when we talk about culture and diversity, it doesn't necessarily have to do with groupings of people that are different colors, and that we have to be sensitive to a variety of circumstances and situations that may, on the surface anyway, look like it might be the same.
Excellent point,
Yeah.
Rick. Excellent point. I think understanding, like, as we're talking about culture, there is so many interconnections associated with culture that I can't just assume because people have the same outwardly identity or inwardly identity that they have the same thoughts and the same process and the same mythologies on every situation. And so, what does it look like for me to look at the individual as I'm doing this work and respecting the the many different cultures that one person might actually represent and understanding it can show up in many, many different spaces in many, many different ways. As Tanner mentioned, I have a background in engineering, and now I'm in more education space. And so understanding there's a culture with engineering and there's a culture with education. There is a culture of extension. And so how do we understand all of that um, interconnectedness, those uniquenesses as we're doing this work as well? And Denardo, I cut you off, so I do apologize.
No, that's fine, Dwayne. I think I would agree with you 100%. And then I also think that we need to understand that we have a long ways to go when it comes to issues of race and other identities, and know that my perspective, I've got four brothers, and we all grew up in the same area of the state, and we all have had different experiences. And I'm the only one that chose to continue to work in social justice and in education. But that doesn't mean that my brothers don't have a valid perspective. And so it's important to understand that, we may get that there's multiple cultures and multiple perspectives, and they're all good. They're all worthwhile for us to take a moment to think about. And then we can say, yeah, we agree with that one, or my perspective may be very different. And that's okay. It's valid. So Rick, what do you have to say?
Well, I I agree with everything. Uh, I just am impressed with the if we're going to do this work properly, there's just so many dimensions to be aware of and have at least a cursory understanding of how things work from a group and an individual dynamic that it's a challenge. Certainly in this day and age with the so-called separations that are artificially, in my opinion, being brought forth to basically to divide us. So um, I just I'm just daily concerned about how it is we get along and begin to do that which you both have been talking about for most of this hour, and that is how we come together and come to terms and understanding. And gee whiz, heavy lift, but somebody's got to do it. So here we are.
Yeah, and I appreciate your shares and thoughts in that regard as well. And one of the things that first popped into my head is how do we give ourselves grace as we're working through this journey, but then also giving other people grace as we're working through this journey as well. Because it's not easy work, it is long-term work. And so as we're continuing to navigate these complex conversations and discussions and guidelines and opportunities, understanding the next person is also doing that on their own journey. And so I'm not superior just because I might be in a different space on that journey, but understand that we're all on that together. And then
That's exactly right. I
yeah.
thanks very much. This is great just for that statement alone.
Oh, thank you. That is recorded. I am glad that this is being recorded because of that alone. I'm sorry. I have to understand. I love to have a good time on Zoom too. So laugh with me or laugh at me. It's all good. So thank you, Rick. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so if you want to go to the next slide. And we want to talk about non-judgmental listening because it's something that is part of this principle, and dignity within diversity also asks us to be non-judgmental in our listening. So listening without judgment means receiving information without attaching personal bias, assumptions, or immediate critical reactions to the speaker's words or emotions. It creates a safe, respectful, and trusting space that validates the speaker's feelings, encouraging open expression rather than defensive silence. So this is one definition of non-judgmental listening. And it feels like it's very hard. And it's something that I know I need to think about all the time. Am I bringing my bias into the situation? Am I bringing my assumptions? And am I going to a debate where I'm looking at critical reactions to the speaker's words or emotions? And so, it's something that I really have to work on, and something that is not easily obtained when I'm in the middle of trying to navigate my emotions, and then also trying to have a safe, respectful, and trusting environment that I can engage with for myself and with others. So, Dwayne, what did you want to add?
I just want to add, our next question, but really keeping this on the screen as we are asking that question is, what does everyone think about this definition? Because certain words are popping out at me, and I would love to have a discussion about that, of this definition. This takes a lot of self-work. You are so right, Tanner. You are so right. But we're in this together. So as you're doing your self work and I'm doing my self work, we're going to come together and make sure that we have the encouragement to continue the work. So yes. Any thoughts when you're reading this definition? And if you have to reread it, that's perfectly fine. Are there certain phrases or keywords that are popping out at you, or you're still need some additional thoughts or questions on certain things? Please share. Again, you can come off of mute and have those conversations, or you can put it in chat. Either way is perfectly fine. I'm gonna give you it takes self-awareness and acknowledgement of unconscious biases. Hi, everyone. Yeah, okay. The post-meeting survey. Yeah, I have doubts that this is ever mastered. Just practice every time. Critical reactions I read as a trigger. Thank you for sharing that. First is understanding my own bias, then active listening. Have to help. Thank you. We appreciate it. So I read this and I agree with everything that has been shared in chat. Um, and Leonardo and I had a great conversation about this. Listening without judgment means receiving information without attaching personal bias. That is hard for me because I instantly attached that personal bias. I have to do the work so my actions don't result in those biases. But without attaching, I don't know if I would be able to ever conquer that part. It's the actions associated with it. It was shared in the share the definition, but when I just read this definition by word alone, that part was hard for me. So,
Yeah. And I think that it's important for us to be in a place where we understand and we know that we all have biases. And
Mhm.
regardless of our upbringing, regardless of where we live, where, the reaction or the interactions we have with others, we oftentimes carry that bias. And there's nothing wrong with saying that I have that because oftentimes I'm trying to hide it. And that becomes more disruptive to a dialogue versus a debate. It gets more into a debate where I'm wanting to make sure that you listen and hear what I'm saying versus me being open to different perspectives and different ways of looking at the world, but understand that I have bias just because I live in this world. That's my understanding of what personal biases are. And so it's one of the things that I really have to be aware of. And it leads to assumptions about different groups, different individuals, and it oftentimes leads to me attacking the speaker for their emotions or their words versus being able to be in a place of listening.
um, and I think on that point, I've just gotten to the space where I am courageous enough to basically say my bias is, and actually speaking it out into existence and sharing it and using that terminology for a number of years. I thought it, acted on it, but didn't actually share it. And I think the last few years I've actually been speaking in that language just to share that perspective, but then also give others the opportunity to share their perspective as well.
Dwayne,
Uh,
how does that play with other groups or other individuals when you actually point out your bias?
I think it depends on the group. And I think it goes back to that space of have we built up enough trust where when I say that, it's engaging enough of a conversation where we can have that dialogue of my biases versus theirs, or their lived experiences versus my lived experience. I think if that trust is not there, I don't know if it's engaging the way that I want it to be engaging, but I think at least me sharing it's at least showing that vulnerability on my space where I'm at least moving into a space of culture where we can have a conversation about everything.
Right.
I'm uh, okay. All right. Anyone want to share more about what they're putting in chat? Because all of this is great and wonderful. And I know we only have so many words, but I just want to make sure if you feel better in vocalizing what you've written, this is an opportunity as well. But if not, it's perfectly fine.
And the second question that we have for you, what gets in the way for you when striving towards non-judgmental listening? What are the things that you personally know that you have to work on in order to get to the place of non-judgmental listening. And for me, it's, being aware of my biases, being aware that
Hmm.
those can oftentimes lead to the stereotypes, or looking at us versus them versus, a more circular type of conversation that I want to have with people.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. It's really removing or understanding or reflecting on my own biases and also extending trust instantly. Um, and all of that, giving people the benefit of the doubt, grace, all of that. And so if the impact is different than their intentions, I at least know that their intentions were correct. If we move into a debate and there are words that are being shared or discussed, I knowing that that's an opportunity for us to learn and they're not trying to belittle or cut or hurt me. And so it's all that trust building instantaneously. And so is one of the things that I'm continuing to work on and continuing to reflect on as well.
Yeah, yeah, I
What
would
about you?
definitely
Yeah.
join.
What about you all? You don't have to share that. If you don't want to share that, we just ask you to reflect on it as well. And so we're understanding our own um, growth opportunities in this regard as well. So if you don't want to share, that's perfectly fine, but just keep that mental note of what are some of the things that I might need some reflecting on, coaching on, continued support on to get into a space of non-judgmental listening so then we can move into the space of conversation and discussion and engagement. So yeah. All right.
Hey, if you want to go to the next slide,
I can for sure.
okay. Accountability is the keystone of equity work. Accountability refers to creating processes and systems that are designed to help individuals and groups to be held in check for their decisions and actions, and for whether the work being done reflects and embodies justice. And this is from a piece that I wrote with a coworker or a colleague of mine around what it means for white people to become allies in the work that we do together. And so accountability really does ask us to be aware of what it is that we might need to be accountable for, and not taking on the perspective of a lot of different people, and just really focusing on myself, the way that I feel, or the way that I can take accountability, and what I can do to help change the formatting. And so for discussion, what are you doing day to day to support accountability in your sphere of influence? So we know we have a particular sphere of influence. And I'm just curious if you want to write in the chat or you want to raise your hand. What are you doing to support accountability in your sphere of influence? And what are some of the markers or outcomes that can be implemented to identify your organization's journey towards accountability? So either of those two questions, if you want to share in the chat or raise your hand, we can call on you. Along with accountability, it's also transparency. Yes, I would agree with you, Keith. I think it's really important to be transparent, and then also to hold yourself accountable for the things that you might have done or you could have said that might have the good intentions, but also have an impact on that's negative on others.
And I agree with that transparency. And I think for me, getting into that transparent space where I'm letting go of ego, I'm letting go of perceived um, perceptions that might actually be there. If I'm being transparent and I'm being transparent in different spaces, what does it look like for me to be okay with that conversation and discussion and not be worried that I'm sharing too much or they might think differently of me in that space or I might, you know, harm my reputation or whatever that is. I'm being transparent in this conversation right here, but really looking into transparency has opened more doors than not for me. And so, I mean, not doors as far as physical positions, but doors as far as conversations and discussions and learning opportunities. And so, what does that look like for me to continue to lean into that space and encourage others to lean into that space as well? For me, being transparent allows the next person to see an opportunity. Doesn't mean that they have to do that, but go through that opportunity as well. I see the other shares as daily reflection and reflexivity, and really thinking about how can I do better the next conversation, the next opportunity, and not dwelling and um, getting worried so much about the last situation that I didn't do as best as I can. Apologizing as necessary, leaving that situation, but also not belittling myself in that regard. Fulfilling my job description, look at it often to make sure that I understand and meet the expectations set. Having that conversation about what do you expect from me? And this is what I expect from you. Because sometimes I found like the debate happens because my expectations were different than theirs, and I never stated that. And so, what does it look like for me to be comfortable to share the expectations of the conversation? Working with communities on truth and reconciliation initiatives to foreground and overturn the negative effects of colonialism. I mean, I cannot speak today, but that's okay. I couldn't speak yesterday when we were talking either. But what does that look like for us to really have some of those reconciliation conversations and discussions and being providing that space for those conversations and discussions to happen, even if solutions are going to take some time and some effort, but at least providing that space for that to happen, especially in institutional spaces as well. I've stressed to my children that if you have created a mess, you need to clean up that mess. Go ahead, Keith. Clean up that mess. Don't leave it for the next person to clean it up. And how many of us have had to clean up somebody else's mess because they did not do this type of work? And so also taking that on as well, that even if it's not my mess, sometimes I actually have to clean it up and then go back and have a conversation with the person that made the mess. So yes,
Yes. And then Lisa
accountability.
says accountability for me is following through and thinking about learnings, reflecting and not being simply tied to completion or target numbers, being conscious of growth and learning and how things will be adapted. And I think that's really important is that your goal is different when you're considering accountability. And that is that I'm not worried about the numbers. I'm worried about the ways that I show up and the ways that I learn and reflect on ways that things are going versus me reflecting just on how I'm doing and being conscious of growth and learning and how things will be adapted. And I think that that's really important is that I go in prepared, but I also know that I need to be adaptive. I need to be aware that even in my preparation, I might have some biases that show up in the way that I prepare. And even for today's discussion, I did a lot to prepare, but I hope that I didn't overstep my boundaries with my co-presenter. And I think it's really important to check in with as individuals. Am I too prepared? Am I prepared enough? Am I adaptable enough that I can show that I can move from place to place or space to space in a situation instead of just being tied to my agenda and tied to the way that I do things? Dwayne, you want to add?
Just for the record, you did marvelous, just marvelous.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, no problem. No problem. I enjoyed all the conversations and co-presenting with you as well. And so I do think in those check-ins as well, I can do some self-reflection, but it's also good for me to go ahead and be okay with asking the next person, can they share a little bit more? How have I shown up? What does this look like? Have I been transparent enough? Have I been listening without judgment? Have my facial expressions actually provided that judgment, even though my vocal expressions actually might not have? And so, really having those conversations and those discussions and really listening for the responses and then actually doing better. And so, what does it look like for me to basically do all those reflections, engage in those conversations, but don't adjust my actions based off of that work? I think, and if I don't adjust, how do I continue to have those conversations? Like I tried it on, it didn't fit for whatever reason, or I didn't work for whatever reason. So I'm still working through this journey. I'm still trying to this journey. So continue to hold me accountable, even though if I'm slipping back into my own actions. And so what does that look like for us to be in that continued growth mindset? And so I think it really boils down to a lot of conversations, discussions, either internally or externally to ensure that we're continuing to do this work as well.
Yeah,
So,
and I think that it's also being aware of our dominant identities, because
mm,
oftentimes those dominant identities that get in the way of us being able to produce something that's more co-creating than what it is. I've got the right way and you just need to follow me. And I think that we need to nurture leaders that are saying, what is it that I can do to co-create versus already having something that I have in mind that worked with the last community that I want to replicate with this community now.
all right. Last question.
Yeah. So what are you taking away from today's webinar that can be helpful in implementing this important principle of uh, dignity within diversity? What are you taking away from today's webinar that can be helpful in implementing this important principle?
You can put a couple of words in chat. You can come off of mute and share that as well. You can write it on a sticky note and stick it onto your monitor so you're continuing to see that every day. You can set yourself as a reminder to check in with yourself in a week, 2 weeks. You can send us a reminder to check in with you in a week to 2 weeks, whatever that looks like for you to have that takeaway. Because too often I've joined webinars or conferences or sessions, all great and wonderful. But then what is the takeaway? What is the actionable step to ensure that I'm doing what's necessary and what's best once I hit leave?
So feel free to put that in the chat or to raise your hand and we'll call on you and then you can have the mic.
I know for me, there's a few of you all, probably more than a few, that I need to follow up based off of all the conversations and shares that you put in chat. So don't be surprised if you just see me trying to connect with you on LinkedIn and say, let's have a follow-up conversation. Continue to listening and being aware of my initial reactions, those judgments, those biases, etc., to work through them and continue to grow. Sounds good, Laura. I work as a city planner. Sometimes a community outreach meeting has not gone the way I had hoped. In a post-mortem staff discussion, I asked my staff that sure didn't go very well. Any thoughts on how we missed? I agree. And I think the other conversation with that is if you can find those trusted community members as well, just to see exactly if you can get that perspective also. So it's balancing both perspectives in that regard as well, to see exactly one, to let them know that you're recognizing that and working through that, but then also to get their buy-in in that space as well. Just some thoughts. Good reminder to keep the things discussed during webinar at the top of my mind. I think reflection continually. I have been making this a goal before, during, and after my work, and as a way of being, reflection, and adapting. Agree. Oh. Embracing a cycle of pause, listen, reflect, act. Yes, pause. Pause and breathe. Sometimes I need to remember to breathe. Even though it's supposed to be natural, I have to remember to just go ahead and breathe. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's the one of the things that I remind myself that it's the thing that's closest to me, but it's also the thing that is really hard for me, and that is breathing. Because I get so involved emotionally in the conversation. And I think that's a reminder for us is that these conversations are not just intellectual interactions, but they're also about, if they're authentic and they're vulnerable. It's also about how do I bring myself in a way that I can understand my emotions and I bring my full self to the discussion versus just a part of me because I've been told that I need to leave a portion of who I am away from the conversation. And Megan is saying I should take the time before a community meeting to check myself, my mood, and my feelings to remain open and non-judgmental when I get inside. And I think that's really important is, what do I do prior to a meeting that will allow me to be fully engaged and be my full self versus just taking a portion of myself into those meetings or community interactions. Dwayne?
Yeah, and I think that that's where a lot of my biases might show up because I might have thoughts in my head about the meeting based off of what others might have said, or based off of news, or based off of this, or based off of prior meetings. And I have to stop, pause, breathe, thinking about what's coming up. Why is my body feeling a certain way? And then going in and basically doing the work. And it could be bad or good. I could go in thinking it's all energetic and great and we're all casual when it really needs to be a business community meeting and I'm coming in one type of way. And so really trying to reflect on that before I go into the meeting is important for me. So you might see me in my car just going in and taking some time to reflect before I actually enter that space as well. So great point. All of those are great points as well.
Yeah, and I think from Tanner or Tammy, there was a addition of there'll be a post-meeting survey in your inbox right after we conclude. We appreciate it if you could complete it. Thanks for your attendance and participation. And on behalf of both Dwayne and myself, I really would like to take the time to say thank you for participating in today's discussion. We hope that we've been helpful. And we hope also that there are things that you can take away and implement and use day to day. Dwayne, anything you want to add?
No, I completely agree. And I'm putting my email in the chat just in case there's additional conversations or discussions you want to have. If you want to teach me a lot more, that is perfectly acceptable and wonderful as well. And so I just thank you for bringing your authentic selves into the space. Thank you for participating actively in the conversations and discussions as well. And so thank you to CDS for asking us to be a part of this conversation, and thank you all for taking time out of your day to be a part of it as well. I appreciate you. And of course, my co-facilitator, I cannot thank you enough. I really can't. It has been an absolute pleasure. So thank you.
Right. Tanner or Tammy?
Yes, and thank you both so much for facilitating this wonderful discussion with us today. As Tammy mentioned, there will be a post-survey questionnaire that will be sent to you. So please do fill that out. It helps us to align the goals of all of our future webinars for our subcommittee. Thank you so much for being a part of today's discussion, and we will see you at the next one.